Welcome back to the PSA Sunday Sitdown. Got my good friend Jerry Perez from FANUC on today. Jerry, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, man.
Excited to dive in here. As you know, with this podcast, and like me, it's very unserious. But in the beginning, I like to kind of chat about, what you actually do and who you actually are within the industry, right? And, a titan of the industry. I don't think I won't make you say that because I know you are. If anybody's ever got a Cobot question, FANUC question, Jerry's the guy. Really, any question. One of the smartest guys I've ever met. So, but I will let you introduce yourself here, Jerry. Tell us what you do at FANUC, because I don't actually know what your official title is.
Sure, that's a lot of fluffing the guest up here. Appreciate that.
Yeah,
appreciate it. Everybody call it Titan. The smallest Titan out there in the world.
Yeah.
So
short kings have to stick together, Jerry.
That's right, man. That's right. What do I do? What's my official title? I do business development. Boy, what does that mean? I think that's a very general title. And there's what I think it means. There's what my company, what we do with that. Business development to me simply is just that. We develop business. And over the last couple of years, been focused on cobot growth, the cobot market. What's FANUC's, what's our play there? We're really clearly, if you're at Automate 2026, you saw anything on posts there, we're very bullish on cobots still. It's still a growing part of our industrial manufacturing market, and that's officially officially is my role of making sure we're still a strong player. We're a strong player in the market, and we've been growing as a stronger player in the market, partly because of many things we can talk about in terms of our position in general, right? Yeah, we're the number one robot company. Okay, that's nice. That's been nice. That's really, okay, there's a lot that went into that. So a lot more kudos than just, that's nice for me. A lot of work that went into establishing that as a position, and now maintaining that position, particularly with, all these new quote unquote robot products. Cobots aren't really that new anymore, but the adoption of them definitely has been increasing, particularly over the last 8 to 10 years, and so that's my role. How do we continue to maintain, our strength and position, provide solutions for the marketplace? I think that's something that's always been a strong pillar for us, is we're not just focused on those products, but how do we really provide those solutions? It sounds like it really doesn't like a buzzword, because it is, we provide solutions for the marketplace. But I think if you think about our partners, our networks, you guys are one of them. That's what we do. It's what we breathe, eat, and sleep. And not just a cool widget, right? We have the luxury and the advantage of being one of those, the original robot manufacturers. Now, when we come out with newer products or product lines, you've got, you don't need a company just, pitching for venture capital dollars in our new tech that we're developing. You can count on things that we're making are stuff that's going to be useful today and the years to come.
Yeah, no, I like that. And we talked a little bit about it before hit record here, but it was like, a few years ago, I remember going to Automate, and this is when cobots were newer, and it's like, oh, what are these cobots? They're pretty cool. And then, obviously we still saw them over the years, but it switched to, AMRs and humanoids. And then this year we went back, and there are cobots everywhere at Automate. And I always kind of use Automate as a good barometer of what's going on in the industry and what people really care about. And what's kind of hot. What do you think is, or why do you think cobots are so hot right now? One of my, I guess to explain sort of my theory is, I remember quoting against cobots, because we didn't have a cobot where I was previously, and it was always like, oh, no guarding this, but then there was always the, oh, we tried a cobot, it didn't work, now we're going to go to an industrial robot. I'll give you a good example. Like, there was a plant that I went to in Michigan, and they're like, oh, the UR20 just came out, so I want to have those in the front so everybody sees those, but I need you to push all of the bigger stuff back into our palletizing room, and we're going to hide these big robots in the back room. Now I see it as cobots are more, they're everywhere, right? Every plant I go to, I feel like they've got some, and I feel like the perception around a cobot isn't as maybe negative as it was, in the past several years. It's more than just kind of a shiny toy. Do you share that sentiment there?
I share multiple aspects of what you said. So I think I have multiple sentiments you just touched on here. I'm a very complex, sentimental person, Josh. So, couple things. man, where to dive into on this. There's a cobots being industrial. Think about, if you just look at the marketing, the messaging, okay, first this, why cobots, why collaborative robots, we call them cobots now for short, why cobots are still around. If a little bit of history, let's go back to the aught years, 2008. And, the launching of, remember the Baxter robot with a face, the big red 2-arm robot was really slow. But it was all, like at that time it's already been like 20 years of industrial robots. Yes, they're caged. Yes, they can be dangerous for sure. And so there was this, I think, people in Europe that were saying, hey, what if we could democratize robots and robots for everybody? Cage free, and I think it was a great vision. And those of us in the industry were kind of like, is this going to be sticking around? And here we are, that's 2008. We're almost, closer to 20 years later. And definitely they've been gaining ground every single year in the US and across the world in terms of percentage of robots deployed every single year has increased, particularly again, the last 8 to 10 years. So why is that? Marketed heavily as easy to program, easy to deploy. You don't need to have a robotics degree, right? You don't need to have PLC, right? So super easy. Marketed as really affordable, right? People hear low cost, and this whole you don't need any experience, that all part of it, and cage free, right? Oh, it works safely around a human. Collaborative meaning to collaborate with a human nearby or assisting a human today. Arguably, a very low percentage of collaborative robot applications are deployed in situations where you're collaborating with a human. Now, I say that because I'm I have to be kind of two-headed about it. Somebody first when I saw collaborative robots, they were cool. I was like, hey, I'm a tech guy, but I'm like, oh, let me try these out. Where could we use these? Can these fill in the gaps where automation hasn't been deployed yet? And then there's the standard industrial robot guy who's like, look, we're FANUC. We've got 220 plus robot variants. We can provide the right tool for the application versus our competition who in the cobot world, all they have are cobots. So let me fast forward. You look at the marketing today, they're pitching higher payloads as we are. We had for the longest time the highest payload cobot on the marketplace. We're keeping increasing it. They're going faster, right? They're messaged as industrial. So you can see these cobot companies now really trying to bridge that gap. Because to some degree, they're like, hey, is this a good application for a cobot? When all they have to sell you are cobots, they're going to say what? Absolutely. That we can make that work. Arguably, is it cage free? 60, 70%. Some people say all of cobots end up getting a barrier, a light curtain, a fence, something like that at some point, right? Because, and this, I do want to touch on this today if we talk cobots, is the latest safety standards, 2025. So I get to do a lot of talks, right? Since 2025, I was talking about the latest cobot safety standards. And little did I know, we would use the word standard pretty loosely for the last 12 years. There were different quote unquote standards, really technical reports, guides, really guidance on, hey, if you're going to deploy a collaborative robot, here's what we recommend, technical recommendation, technical reports for what you should do to deploy that safely. It wasn't until 2025, it became a standard. It became you must comply, Mr. Robot OEM, when we designed these robots to be, to work in collaborative applications, to be really power and force limiting, if I get into technical terms, those PFL robots. There's now must comply standards for integrators. And in January of 2026, there was a part 3 of ANSI A3 15.06, 2025 part 3 that now addressed end users, what they must do. And so why am I talking safety standards when it comes to cobots and collaborative robots? Why is because when you look at, if you ask anybody, hey, can I put a collaborative robot in this application? Will it be safe? Integrators, everybody would say, what do? What's the first thing you do, Josh? You got to do a what? You got to do what? Fill in the blank.
Site assessment?
Site assessment, a risk assessment, right? You got to do risk assessment.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Safety,
that's what everyone says. Yeah, not a problem. We'll do a risk assessment. What do you do? Now, in the actual standard, yes, you do risk assessment, but you must actually measure any intended and unintended contact forces. and you've got to be able to record those. It's kind of like in case of audit, those got to be captured somewhere. So what does that mean? In the standard, I'm going to get, everyone loves hearing about standards, I know. But there's a map of a body in the standard, and it says the maximum allowable, like Newton meter forces allowed in contact. Okay. So if I look at an application, if I'm going to pick up these pieces back and forth, and I've got like sharp, grippy pointers, or not even rounded, pointy fingers, 2-3 finger grippers to pick this up. If that's an unintended contact with this part of my body here at a certain speed, even unintended, I'm going to have to measure that per the latest safety standards. Most speeds at like usable production rates are probably going to go fast enough to, go past those allowable thresholds of force. Basically, this in a nutshell. I'm not sure most people, if they actually followed the latest standard, would pass for not fencing. Of Roberta Nelson Shea, head of A3 Safety Committee, love her to pieces. She talks about fear of fences, foof. And she's like, you can deploy now safely per standards and use new technology, but is the cost worth it? There's this weird fear of fences that came with launch of cobots. So, okay, so that was all of the, all the ways that what you first said, all the things I thought about that I might want to address and say, like why cobots today, they're marketed as industrial, why are they still popular? Bottom line, they still are lightweight. 120 volt plug into the wall means if I don't have a power drop, which most US manufacturers don't have a 220 or 480 volt drop at all their machines. So these cobots are good for retrofit, which is like 60%, 70% of those applications is let me put this robot in front of a machine that exists. I don't have a power drop. Great. 120 volt plug into the wall. It's lighter mass, so easier, right? So lighter to put in. And then, I have lead through teach, move it by hand. It does have easier to teach functions. Okay. That was it. That was like 10 minutes of a lot of different things. I think I went there with it.
You touched on two of the bigger things, right? As someone, again, who had to sell against cobots years ago, it was like, okay, well, I'm in this smaller manufacturing. None of these manufacturing facilities that we've been to have been, manufactured for automation, right? It was like they were all built 100 years ago or whatever, and there's just walls wherever they want to be and columns everywhere and all this. So you'd go into a place and they'd be like, this is where line 1 is. We cannot move line 1, and you have an 8x8 footprint. It's like, okay, well, I'm out because I've got fencing. I've got you want 2 pallet stations. You've got this big base. So I think part of what made it attractive, and nobody was thinking about, at least, from a space constraint perspective, nobody's thinking like, safety or, anything. They're like, can I get this robot to fit in there and will it work? So you go tell someone, you don't need to have the safety fencing around there. Like, okay, cool. They're on board because you can have a smaller footprint. So I think that was, and some of those are still true today, right? It's like, it's a smaller footprint. You can still get the job done. And like you said, a lot of collaborative robots aren't actually, collaborating with a human, right? It's just a smaller robot with no fence that you could throw at the end of a line that, it will do what you need to do. And it's a good sort of not entry level, but for a lot of people, it's an entry level into automation, right? Because it's lower cost, lower risk, all those things. So I do think that those are still some of the big selling points, right? So then you, as, doing someone who does business development for the, the largest, robotics OEM here in the US, do you feel like part of it is you go in there armed with really any solution, which you have a cobot, you have plenty of industrial robots, and you have the brand awareness? Is that sort of the, all three, 3 really good pillars for you as you're going to pitch these companies and try to get them to sort of standardize on, say, FANUC? And not to discount you as a salesperson or anything like that, but it's like you're sort of going in with an advantage, right? So it's like, how is FANUC working to keep that advantage in, a time where everybody's trying to get faster and cheaper and, all those things?
Sure. I think, why do I say
another
sure?
Loaded question?
I'm like, I know, right? It's like, well, where do I go with that? Well, where do we have advantage? If I think of the 96% of manufacturing locations in America, something like 254,000 manufacturing plants, it's like 96% of them are like SMEs, small, medium businesses. If I don't think about the size of business per se, but I think about somebody who's utilized and deployed robots over the years, and they're an adopter. Maybe they have 5 CNC machines and they have 3 robots, or maybe they're a company who has, I've walked plants where there's 500 CNC machines and they have 0 robots, right? So to me, I'm like, it depends on if you've adopted robots, yes or no. If you have before, then we have some advantage because there's a likelihood you've considered us in the past, either us or one of our, our large integrators who deploy our solutions. So I think there's where do we get this advantage? And this is some of the questions I've had to face and look public. I had to look out and see what had people buy, or what really is a solution people would want. And I say people or companies, what kinds of companies? So there's definitely there's sizes of companies who've deployed a lot of robots in the past. And one company deployed 120 cobots in 1 year. They self-deployed them too. It's really hard to really fathom that. Some large companies who had, say, medium adoption rate of cobots are deploying 50 cobots across, hundreds of plants, and it's taking them a couple years. So there's varying degrees of cobot adoption based on experience, right? In general, my take on it is this: we're making products that still maintain our brand, which has carried us to this day, which is, some of the most reliable robots. The most affordable part is part of my marketing positioning. I'll talk about that here in a bit. But so we're making sure we've got cobots that are going to last, right? We've got our 8 years, maintenance free guarantee. There's still a warranty, but this is a cobot that's built to last at 165,000 hours mean time between failure. That's a long time. So great. We've got that. For new development, let's talk physical AI, AMRs, putting cobots on AMRs, basically tying in a new technology, whether it be a vision camera. We had a demonstration with InBolt, in terms of, the robot is following the part along, it's moving, and the robot, dynamic path augmentation, all that stuff. We have to make sure our product is, future ready. I'm able to plug in with future tech. And then the third part, so we got the reliability part down. It's part of our brand. We've got the plugging into future tech. So all these VC-backed startups, hey, large manufacturers want to use this new technology, warehouse logistics. Remember that played for the last, in the early 2020 years, that was a big market. All those things we had to make sure our cobots play with. The last thing I want to say that I think is kind of across the board that we're starting to see, whether you're a large manufacturer and SME, is solutions. So at Automate, we had our Cobot and Go. That's our tagline for our pre-engineered, built for an application solution, meaning this is a machine tender cobot, $125K or $2,000 a month. This is a palletizing cobot, $115K or $1,800 a month for 5 years, right? That's, that part we started to build at this past year, because when we look at the messaging for cobots was easy to deploy, I thought, well, people still aren't putting in smart refrigerators or smart dishwashers. Yeah. It's a robot. I got to think about fixturing, tooling. What about changeover? What happens if my part isn't exactly in the right spot? You know what I mean? If there's a machine I got to communicate to. Yeah, it's easy to move the robot by hand. And look at that. I did that demonstration in 20 minutes. And yeah, sure, you can deploy that robot really easily. But if you never did robots before, all those things you don't know in your blind spot, you don't even know that you're supposed to actually think about fixturing and part variation, blah, 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 blah. To me, our solution for solving that barrier for robot adoption are those pre-engineered Cobot and Go cells. And I had said it earlier, making it affordable, now making sure that these cells have a monthly payment option right to it. It's not rental, it's not RaaS. It really is, hey, look, it's a monthly payment. You own it at the end. It's your instant ROI. It's as easy as leasing a car. So those are some of my takes.
Has that been a recent sort of marketing push on the maybe the FANUC side? Because obviously the reputation is there from a standpoint of reliability and brand awareness, but nobody ever says, who's the cheapest robot out there? Oh, FANUC. Like nobody ever says that, right? So is that
Exactly.
something where, obviously you don't want to be known as the cheapest, right? But you want to be affordable. So has that been a push to make sure it's like you kind of keep your foot on the pedal, right? Because you can only say it's been, we're the leading, U.S. robot manufacturer for so long. If you got to still market when times are good, right? So has that sort of been some things that you guys have been doing on your side to say, how do we make sure we keep market share? How do we make sure we're continuing to push the message? All those things.
Yeah, I feel like financing is like the American way, to be honest. It's kind of like it's how people, how did people get into a Cadillac when they wouldn't buy a Cadillac with cash? How do people afford today, their $500,000, $1 million house when they wouldn't buy that with cash? We have low interest rates. And so it's a way, we've never, companies buy CNC machine tools, they finance them all day long. It's part of that standard process. So part of that is, hey, how do we create that? Because there's been financing for automation and capital equipment, for forever, but now we're making that a program. So yes, we are. You could say, great, yeah, we're like the Cadillac, but could you get a very low cost, overseas cobot? Yeah, absolutely. And arguably, if it's your very first robot, you're not sure if it's going to work or not, and you really don't have a lot of cash or capital, and maybe even $1,700 a month is hard to justify for a turnkey solution ready to go, then great. Maybe you should get that one first. Get the lower cost version. Just play with it. See what you can do when you're ready to upgrade. We hear that. That's something that we do hear that. Hey, we've been 4 weeks ago at Automate, there's a company, they had a lower cost, they had one of those old Sawyers, and they had a lower cost Chinese cobot, and they replaced both of those, right? Ready to upgrade, right? And so we get that. And so for companies who want to start new, maybe, hey, no, I know I need robots, or I already got industrials, instead of like keeping away from, stay competitive with some of the lower cost manufacturers. Great. It's more, now we can make it affordable, right? To get into a FANUC.
Yeah. And on that note, and maybe we cut this part, maybe we leave it in, but where do you stand on the OpEx versus CapEx, the whole RaaS, thing that's going on with some companies out there? Are you a RaaS guy? Is that something that, FANUC will start to incorporate? Because it's always been sort of a thing. It's like, well, if you have enough volume, you can just offer RaaS, right? You don't necessarily have to go through a RaaS company, right? So was wondering what your thoughts are, since we're talking about financing on RaaS in general here in robotics and CapEx versus OpEx. Do you let the maintenance manager sign the OpEx, PO now versus having to go overseas to get, approval for a CapEx? Does it make it easier? Where do you stand on all that?
Well, I think it's the tax bill 279, the big, beautiful bill. Part of that still maintained for that you can depreciate all of you depreciate the value in your first year, even with a lease. So some people, they have that thought, well, I get those, I have the tax benefits of CapEx versus OpEx. Well, with current taxes, and you have to, whatever, if you watch this video later on, you got to, check what that is. At least currently, no, there's still advantages for that. Thing about RaaS is, so I'll say this. The thing, when I talk financing, when I talk with our partners, anything about financing, if you watch Fight Club, you'll hear me say, the first rule about financing is we don't talk about financing. and why do I say that? Is because, one, people might say RaaS, and what they're thinking about is actually monthly payment. And if you ask me, Jerry, what's your opinion on RaaS? I'm like, well, what do you mean? If you really want to talk about robot as a service for the companies who truly deploy it, that means it's typically you're paying like tokens or credits, right, for usage of that. And you're paying for usage, and you usually have to buy it in increments of a year, typically commonly like 2-3 year plans. So I'm kind of upfront, like buying into something, to a system working, and I'm going to buy some credits up front. Like, but what does it mean? It means I have to have some sort of management system to make sure it's up and running. If I need service, robot as a service, there's mechanisms, software, hardware that for true RaaS models, robot as a service, those have to be implemented. And so it's not just a financing tool. If I'm the integrator and I'm deploying RaaS, typically I'm going to have, if I'm truly talking RaaS now I'm talking, there's got to be some sort of interface. It's kind of like, I'm going to pay my car just for the miles I use the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to prepay those miles. But that means the company who's selling me my car has to monitor that. The banks who's going to accept it. And if it goes down, typically with RaaS packages, the thing I like about RaaS packages in theory for the end user is low risk. If it breaks down, you gotta repair that for free. So what ended up happening with RaaS was the companies who were very bullish on RaaS, some companies were deploying them, doing the RaaS model for bespoke custom automation solution. Tons of risk. So there's a lot of capital, tons of risk of it not running, and all of a sudden that was not very affordable. So what became RaaSable, meaning as long as the company had those hardware software stacks that did the monitoring of the operations and had service packages, like remote service capabilities, right? It was feasible to do that from the service provider standpoint. Then you saw success in that model with standard products, standard applications, pre-engineered cells, low risk applications. That's why AMRs do well with RaaS. That's why cleaning robots do well with RaaS, because there's a kind of like fixed type of deployments and positions. Now, if you ask me, Jerry, do you do RaaS? And I have a sense you're talking about monthly payments. I will say, yeah, I do RaaS. Not a problem.
You can have it at the end, right?
Exactly. Yeah. 115K CapEx up front or 1,700 a month. If you want to call that RaaS, I'll do RaaS. But that's my whole point. What I think about RaaS is I think it's great for the products were low risk in terms of, and I'd like to clarify, if I have a chance to clarify RaaS, hopefully I did that. But really at the end of the day, what we are really pushing for is just, look, you can do 115K for the whole palletizer as in one example, or 1,700 a month, and you own it at the end.
Yeah. I like it. Well, I think we got into a lot on the technical side. So let's get into something outside the safety fencing, for lack of a better term. So let's
outside the safety fencing. Sorry, it was a really loud laugh, and that really got me. It was good.
Yeah, that I've been workshopping names for podcasts, basically leaning into my strengths, which is not at all technical capabilities, right? I'm like, and how do I start a podcast for our industry and not have to talk anything about technical things? I'm like, automation after hours, that would work. Outside the fencing, play on
I like
words. That. But yeah, so what I like to get into on this podcast is, we talked a little bit about it before. It's nobody grew up and said, hey, I want to sell robots in robotics. And maybe now they do, right? It's probably a lot easier to do that now. And if they said that 30 years ago, they weren't thinking about the robots that, we interact with all the time, right? They were thinking about something they saw on, the Jetsons or something, right? So what did second grade Jerry want to be when he grew up?
Boy, this is outside the safety fences. Mom, if you're listening, she knows the whole story because she was there. 17 years old. I come home and I'm like, oh, Mom and Dad, I know exactly what I want to do. I want to be a high school math and physics teacher. And I grew up in a very quote unquote Asian household. It's very true. It's very accurate. It's not stereotypical at all. And we had a good 45-minute conversation afterwards, which at the end of it, I had an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, which my father and I stepped through my life between the ages of 17 and up until about 32, and what I was going to accomplish every year of my life. And teaching was not part of that, because part of the 45-minute conversation was, how are you going to pay your bill? How are you going to afford it? Like, look, teachers out there, you guys are underpaid. Absolutely, for your teacher listening to this for whatever reason, absolutely need to be paid more money. But that's what I wanted to do. There's something around with working with students and kids, or teaching in to some degree, right? And so that was one of the things that I really did. And I've been able to have that as an outlet. Like, I would do public talks. I used to work with a company where I was kind of like a professional coach, right? So I've been able to exercise that in different ways. And I think in the mediums today, in my role, I get to do that a bit, but I still had, I had this dream that I got 2 kids, and I always said when they were in school, I was going to be in their schedule. And that was a big part of why be a teacher for me, because the home life is really important to me. And so like that was kind of the dream. And high school math and physics, that was my jam. My degree from University of Michigan Go Blue was around mechanical engineering, plus is interdisciplinary. So you can then go study other things. Mine was around secondary education and physics and mathematics. So I got to study advanced particle physics. It was so cool. I still get excited about that stuff. I was really bad at it. I'm really bad at it. I really am. I had to do differential equations twice, right? I was that so bad, but I love it. So I don't know if that would make me a great teacher, but either way, that's what I like to do. That was for me growing up. The things that, like, now, what does that look like outside the safety fences? I think it's my time with my kids. I try to, recently I used to be like a CrossFit guy in my 30s. I'm in my 40s now. I think my joints are paying for that a little bit. So I've taken it easy, but I've recently just kind of got back into some health and fitness. Now you'll see me at the gym. I do a good 20-minute stretch. I'm like old man stretching my hips. And, you get older, like, you just don't care how you look. I'm like, yes, I'm doing all these, people are like, you're not that old, Jerry. I said, I know, but my body feels it. But yeah, that's what I wanted to do when I grew up. And today I'm still looking for, time for my other hobbies. I played jazz, love jazz. I played jazz piano. I've been picking up the drums. I've got an upright bass as well. I love to play. So music is a big part of, is my jam as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't realize that. So is that something you'd like to do more of in the future? Right. I mean, I know I'm in the thick of it too, right? I've got 2 small kids, and it's easy to, if you ask my wife, she'll say, I don't put my hobbies on hold. And I don't. I really don't. I should play less golf. But is that something that you're thinking, okay, because there's going to be a time, right, when the kids are off doing their own thing and at college, and, what are you going to do then?
I did my pretend you're at the end of your life and look back. I had one of those like little sessions for myself. And I was like, the thing I would regret the most was if I didn't get to play like some of my favorite great jazz musicians. And I had breakthroughs in my playing. I had stagnant playing between the ages of like 12 and Pete's. It was like 2000 and 2014. So I was 33. I have to be accurate in my math, right? So for like,
you're a physics guy. I'm the one who dropped math in high school.
So call it 20 years. My playing was pretty stagnant. Like, I was played really well, but I could kind of, everything kind of started to sound the same. Had this huge breakthrough. Listen, I would go to Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and like Friday open mic nights, or not open mic, jazz jam sessions. And I had this breakthrough. I picked up this upright bass. I never played the thing. I just picked it. I said, I want to get it. I got it for like $75 at an art fair. And this one night I came home, played the thing until literally my fingertips were like bleeding. And I was playing stuff I was like just playing what I could think. The thing I always dreamed I could do, I wanted to do. And that night, for whatever reason, it happened. Like, I started to realize, man, I got the chops. It's like anything you take on and you master, you do the basics of it. You have like the basics chops and the mechanics down. All of a sudden there's this freedom. I let myself kind of just play. And I couldn't play bass anymore that night because my fingers were bleeding. The next morning, like on my keyboard, and I'm like, I wonder if this transfers. And it did. And ever since then, like the last, 10, 12 years has been a much cooler journey for me around music, around what can I play? I can hear things and play that and just play more freely. Now there's like, I have a sense of, I'd love to be able to sit in on a, jazz jam session, or even have a trio at some point. Absolutely. And now I'm actually working on some things, in terms of my chops and things like that to work on that. And like in the age of AI, it's great because I can feed in what I'm currently doing with how I want it to sound. And it kind of breaks it down for me even more. So as an engineer, decoding music, has always been, I think, in the back of my mind. And now I got tools to kind of help me do that.
I like it. How's the jazz scene there in suburban Detroit? I would imagine it's pretty good in Royal Oak and the surrounding areas, right? They have any jazz clubs out there that you can go to?
We've definitely got, we have 2 of the nation's oldest jazz clubs, Cliff Bell's, Baker's Keyboard Lounge. My jazz teacher when I was 14, 15 years old used to play at Baker's Keyboard Lounge. He's one of one of the standard keyboards guys there. Anyways, 2 those great places. We had a place in Ann Arbor called Bird of Paradise. No longer there. It's been, I think recently it went through a couple changes of bars and whatnot. And I think it became a jazz club again. One of my favorite stories, my favorite jazz artist is Oscar Peterson Trio. I've listened to his Night Train album on, 30 years on a repeat, basically. His bassist, his name is Ray Brown. I was walking because I was going to school there. I was walking the streets one random Wednesday. A flyer flies like to my feet. I lean down and I pick it up, and it's a yellow flyer. It has like Bird of Paradise, right? Looked like an 8-year-old made the thing, and it says tonight Ray Brown Trio, and I'm like, what? And so I literally go back. I go walk downtown. I walk downstairs to Bird of Paradise. I'm sitting this random, high top, like right at the stage, seeing Ray Brown play. Little did I know, a few weeks later, Ray Brown would pass away. And I was like, I got to see one of his last live. It was really, really, really like still like, I love that. So years later, a few years later, I got to see Oscar Peterson play live, all that stuff. So it's like, that's, so yeah, we've got jazz places here, and different, random small stuff. And even our local bowling alley, jazz jam sessions on Wednesday nights. So,
really?
Yeah. Yep.
Nice. Yeah. Good to know. Well, next time I'm out there, we'll go catch the jazz show.
Yeah. Cool. What about you? You're a musician. What do you play? What's your?
Oh, I'm not a musician. No, I don't play anything. I play golf. No, I believe it or not, I would love to play the piano. I'll tell a funny story. So when I was a kid, I think, all of us at one point, our parents signed us up for, piano lessons, right? And when I was a kid, I remember going to 2 piano lessons, and it was, close to my house or whatever. And that was it. There was 2. And I'm like, oh, why aren't we going to piano tonight? It's like, oh, football practice. So piano. I did 2 lessons in piano, but I think my oldest son, I think will probably be a musician. I think he's certainly shown a real liking to all sorts of music. And my wife's family's got a lot of musicians on her side of the family. That hopefully that trait and that talent will pass along to my kids. But how about your kids? Are they playing? Have you been able to introduce them to to your passion? Are they picking it up?
Yeah, it's a very musical household at home. Always has been. They'll hear me play and whatever. Like I've had my son on my lap when he was a kid, and he just, I'm playing with background tracks and things like that. So and how we've been about the piano is we just let him play. I just let him play. And it was really cool to hear, my daughter, she just turned 9. My son's about to turn 6. She would get on the piano and just start singing something and start to just pick at it and figure out the notes, and she started to play that. So it's kind of like, and that very different than my upbringing. I was, piano lessons. One of my lessons, I remember I hid under the bed because I didn't want to do it. My parents were like, where are you? It's like, clearly I'm in the house, right? I'm like 8 years old. I hated those lessons. So my approach to the kids is a little bit different, where it's like, they both can carry a tune. They're great singers. They love just making up songs and singing. They both, I think, are musically inclined, and they got rhythm, stuff like that. But I'm like trying to feel them out on there's this piano app, which is really cool. So it's kind of like, my daughter loves that. She loves just doing that for now. So she's into gymnastics. She's, my son's into karate and some other stuff. So it's kind of like we're in their age where they're just, trying a bunch of different stuff. Either way, as long as I'm at home or whatever, they're gonna get music. And so I think that's kind of the biggest thing. My favorite thing that happened though, dude, was last week. Oh my gosh, I had this Oscar Peterson band call live at London House in Chicago. It's like 1962. My daughter is, as the very beginning, like the first opening, she's starting to sing with it, and she knows what it sounds like. And I'm sitting there driving, I'm like, yeah, baby. So it was a cool, like, whatever, awesome. jazz dad moment. So
yeah, no, that's awesome. I know this this might surprise you. I forgot I should have mentioned this. So in college, my roommate was a huge piano guy, and he loved Oscar Peterson as well. So it was always like, in the beginning, I sort of hated this, but he like could not sleep. And back then it was the dorms where, we had the bunk beds, and he would put on Oscar Peterson Pandora, throwback to Pandora when that was big, and like RainyMood.com. And we had this crazy box fan, that was always going because, they controlled the climate or whatever in college. And it brings back memories of that. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, why can I not sleep unless I have piano music and like rain sounds going? You get used to that for 2 years or so. But yeah, it's funny. It's good stuff though. I like it. What about the piano app? Is that on like the iPad and then you play the actual piano, or are you playing the piano on like an iPad?
Yeah, it's on iPad. I think it's on all the mobile platforms. It listens for you to hit the right note. You just pop that up on the keyboard and it just follows along. So yeah, it's super easy.
Show my son that one. Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Well, this was fun. Yeah, I like getting into the stuff outside of the industry because we see each other a lot, and it's usually at a show, and start talking about industry stuff, right, or bringing customers by or things like that. But yeah, I wish all of us in this industry just got to hang out more, right, outside of the PAC expos of the world and the events. But yeah, this is sort of my. I've been liking doing this podcast for that reason, for sure. So
that's great, man. Well, good to know you play golf. I used to play golf. I played golf in high school. I worked at a golf course. That's why I played. If I get to go out once a year, I'm lucky. It's something I'm quote unquote working on. Having that time for it, right? Because I still love it. I can still, I'm not duffing the ball when I do go out and shoot. So, if you're in town, happy to you can
for sure.
You can humiliate me on the course, and I'll take some tips as we get out there.
It'll be fun. Then we'll hit the jazz club on the way home. I like it.
Sounds good, man. Sounds good.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jerry. Why don't you tell everyone where to find you? It's kind of a funny thing for me to say, like, a million people listen to this podcast. But if they are listening, where would they find you online?
Sure. I mean, if you want to find me, I'm LinkedIn. You can find me there for sure. If you're wanting to get into cobots, you're wanting to get into and get more information on some things I touched on today. One, you're going to see some posts from me on LinkedIn in terms of latest safety standards, latest trends, things like that. But then definitely on our website, crx.fanucamerica.com, you're going to see all of those pre-engineered solutions in those ecosystems in terms of all those devices and new technologies, physical AI, all the new stuff that our cobots need to play with. You'll find that there at the website.
Awesome. Thank you, Jerry. Always fun. I'll see you soon, and we'll definitely have you back on the pod.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks.